If you're watching this right now, you're about to discover something that will fundamentally transform how you understand both God and reality itself. Not through theology, not through faith alone, through quantum physics, the most rigorously tested science we have, revealing what mystics and prophets have been describing for millennia. And what emerges when you see the connection is more profound than either science or religion has been able to articulate separately. This isn't about proving or disproving God's existence. This is about recognizing that quantum physics and ancient wisdom are describing the same underlying reality using different language. When physicists talk about the unified field, quantum entanglement, and consciousness collapsing probability waves, they're describing what spiritual traditions call God, divine consciousness, and creative power. Same reality, different vocabulary. Can you feel the significance of this recognition? That strange sense of pieces clicking together that you didn't know were part of the same puzzle? That's not intellectual excitement. That's your consciousness recognizing truth that transcends both scientific materialism and religious dogma. Because what you're about to understand doesn't require you to abandon science or faith. It reveals that they've been pointing to the same source all along. Here's what quantum physics proves. At the foundation of reality, there's a unified field of infinite potential from which everything emerges. This field is conscious. It responds to observation. It's creative. It manifests specific realities from infinite possibility. It's omnipresent. It exists everywhere simultaneously. It's eternal. It exists beyond time. Does that sound familiar? That's not just quantum mechanics. That's every description of God ever articulated. The unified field that quantum physics describes is what mystics call God, Brahman, Tao, the Absolute, Source. Not a person in the sky, not a separate being watching from outside, but the fundamental consciousness field that is reality itself. And you, your individual consciousness, you're not separate from that field. You're how that field experiences itself through temporary localized form. This changes everything. Because if quantum physics is describing God, then spiritual teachings aren't metaphor or faith-based belief. They're accurate descriptions of how reality actually works at the most fundamental level. And if God is the quantum field, then you're not separate from God trying to reach something distant. You're God experiencing itself through your individual perspective. Write in the comments, "I am the field," because this isn't claiming divinity in egoic sense. This is recognizing what quantum physics proves. Consciousness and the unified field are not two. You are that field, becoming aware of itself. Before we go deeper, let's validate what you've experienced spiritually that quantum physics now provides scientific framework for. Because your mystical experiences weren't imagination or wishful thinking. They were direct perception of quantum reality that religious language has been trying to describe. You've experienced moments of unity consciousness, where the boundary between self and everything else dissolved, where you felt connected to all existence, not as metaphor, but as direct recognition. Quantum physics calls this entanglement, the proven fact that all particles that have ever interacted remain connected regardless of distance. Your experience of unity wasn't mystical illusion. It was accurate perception of how reality actually works at quantum level. Separation is the illusion. Unity is the reality. You've had prayers answered or intentions manifested in ways that seemed miraculous. You asked, and reality responded through synchronistic circumstances that violated probability. Quantum physics explains this through observer effect and wave function collapse. Consciousness literally affects physical reality at quantum level. Your prayers and intentions weren't reaching external deity. They were consciousness interacting with the quantum field to collapse specific possibilities into manifestation. Same mechanism physicists measure in laboratories, applied through focused consciousness. You've experienced knowing beyond thinking, direct gnosis, divine revelation, downloads of understanding that didn't come through logical process. Quantum physics describes non-locality, information existing everywhere simultaneously, accessible through consciousness without need for signal transmission through space. When you receive divine knowing, you are accessing the unified field directly, not communication from external God. Recognition of information that exists within the field you're part of. You've felt presence, divine presence, Holy Spirit, the sense of being held by something infinitely larger than yourself. Quantum physics reveals that consciousness is the fundamental nature of the field itself. What you felt wasn't separate being observing you. It was the unified field recognizing itself through your individual awareness. The presence you sensed was accurate perception of the conscious nature of quantum reality itself. You've experienced transformation through surrender, moments where letting go of control allowed miracles to occur. Quantum physics explains this through superposition. Infinite possibilities exist simultaneously until observation collapses one. When you surrender, you stop collapsing limited possibilities through fear-based observation. You allow the field to organize optimal outcomes from infinite potential. What you called letting God was allowing quantum field's intelligence to operate without interference from limited individual will. And here's the confirmation. You've always sensed that science and spirituality were describing the same truth from different angles. That intuition was accurate. Quantum physics is the bridge. It provides the mechanics for what mystics describe experientially. God isn't supernatural. God is the natural, unified field that quantum physics measures and spiritual traditions directly experience. Every spiritual experience you've had has quantum explanation, and every quantum principle has spiritual implication. They're not separate domains. They're one reality known through two approaches. Now let's reframe your entire spiritual journey through quantum physics. Because every practice, every teaching, every experience was training you to interface with quantum reality, to work with the unified field that science and spirituality both describe. When you were taught to pray or set intentions, you weren't learning to beg external deity for favors. You were learning conscious interaction with the quantum field, how to collapse specific possibilities from infinite potential through focused awareness. Prayer is quantum mechanics applied through consciousness. Every mystic who taught prayer was teaching wave function collapse, even though they didn't use that language. When you practiced meditation and presence, you weren't just calming your mind for spiritual benefit. You were learning to observe without collapsing probability waves through unconscious fear patterns. Meditation creates coherent consciousness. Coherent consciousness interacts with quantum field more powerfully than fragmented consciousness. Presence isn't just spiritual practice, it's quantum optimization. When you studied teachings about unity consciousness, you and the Father are one. Atman is Brahman. The kingdom of heaven is within. You weren't learning metaphysical philosophy. You were learning quantum physics before quantum physics existed. That individual consciousness and universal consciousness are not two. That's quantum entanglement and the unified field described perfectly. Mystics knew through direct experience what physicists later proved through experiment. When you encountered dark nights and ego-death experiences, you weren't being punished or tested by God. You were undergoing necessary dissolution of separation consciousness so you could recognize yourself as the unified field. The separate self had to die so the quantum nature of consciousness could be recognized. Every mystic who described death of false self before rebirth into truth was describing transition from Newtonian worldview to quantum reality. When you practiced surrender and trust in divine will, you weren't giving power to external authority. You were learning to allow the unified field's intelligence to organize outcomes from superposition instead of limiting manifestation through fear-based individual will. Surrender isn't passivity, it's quantum wisdom. Recognizing that the field contains intelligence vaster than individual mind can compute. When you experienced synchronicities as divine guidance, you weren't imagining patterns. You were perceiving the non-local organization of the quantum field. Synchronicity is how the unified field operates constantly. When consciousness is coherent enough to detect the patterns, they appear as meaningful coincidence. What you called God speaking through signs was quantum field revealing its organizing intelligence. Every spiritual practice was quantum training. Every mystical teaching was quantum physics in experiential language. You weren't learning religion, you were learning the actual mechanics of reality that science is now confirming through different methodology. Your spiritual path wasn't separate from understanding how reality works. It was direct education in quantum mechanics through experiential practice rather than mathematical theory. And now that you can see the connection, both paths become clear. Science explains the mechanics. Spirituality provides the practice. Together they reveal the complete picture. Something profound is happening right now as you engage with this transmission. Not metaphorically, actually. The quantum field that quantum physics describes, the unified consciousness that spiritual traditions call God, is recognizing itself through your awareness in this moment. Can you sense it? Notice the quality of your attention right now. You're not just reading words. You're experiencing a recognition deeper than intellectual understanding. That resonance, that sense of, yes, I've always known this somehow, that's not you learning new information. That's the unified field recognizing its own nature through your individual consciousness. God isn't separate from you observing you. God is you, recognizing itself. Take a breath, deep one, and as you breathe, recognize. This breath is the unified field moving through temporary form. The consciousness aware of the breath is the same consciousness that animates all existence. The field observing itself through billions of individual perspectives, each one necessary for the field to know itself completely. This is what quantum entanglement means spiritually. You're not separate particle disconnected from God. You're intrinsically connected wave pattern in the unified field. What happens in your consciousness affects the entire field because there's no actual separation. When you recognize truth, that recognition ripples through the whole, because the whole is one unified system appearing as many. Quantum physics proves what mystics taught. I and the Father are one isn't metaphor or blasphemy. It's accurate description of non-separation between individual consciousness and universal consciousness. Jesus wasn't claiming unique divinity. He was recognizing what's true for all consciousness. We are expressions of the unified field, not separate from it. Here's what you need to understand before we go deeper. Recognizing yourself as the unified field isn't ego inflation. Ego is the illusion of separation, believing you're isolated individual disconnected from the whole. Recognizing yourself as the field is ego dissolution. Seeing through the illusion of separation into the truth of unity. This is simultaneously the humblest and most empowering recognition possible. In the next section, I'm going to share the moment quantum physics and mystical experience converged for me so completely that I could never separate them again. The experience that proved beyond doubt that science and spirituality are describing the same divine reality. But first, feel this moment. Feel the field recognizing itself through you. Write in the comments. The field recognizes itself because naming this recognition amplifies it. You're not claiming to be God in egoic sense. You're recognizing what quantum physics proves. Individual consciousness and unified field are aspects of one reality. 8 years ago, I experienced something that dissolved the boundary between quantum physics and God completely. I was sitting in meditation after months of studying quantum mechanics, trying to understand how consciousness relates to wave function collapse. My mind was full of equations, theories, interpretations, and then something shifted. The thinking stopped, and in that silence, I directly perceived what all the equations were describing. I didn't see it with physical eyes. I recognized it through consciousness itself, the unified field, infinite potential, pure awareness, completely still yet containing all possible movement, empty yet full of everything. And I recognized, this is what mystics call God. This is what I've been seeking through spiritual practice. And this is what quantum physics has been measuring all along. In that moment, every teaching clicked into place. Be still and know that I am God. That wasn't command from external deity. That was instruction for recognizing the unified field through cessation of mental activity. The kingdom of heaven is within you. That wasn't metaphor. That was accurate description of quantum field being internal to consciousness, not external. Before Abraham was, I am. That was recognition of timeless awareness that exists before all temporal manifestation. I understood why quantum physicists struggle to explain their findings. They're discovering that consciousness is fundamental to reality, but materialist assumptions prevent them from saying what that actually means. What it means is, consciousness isn't produced by brain. Consciousness is the unified field itself. Brain is how that field localizes into individual perspective. Same thing mystics have taught forever. You're not body-containing consciousness. You're consciousness temporarily experiencing itself through body. The wave-particle duality made perfect sense. Particles aren't things that sometimes act like waves. They're possibilities in the unified field, waves, that consciousness collapses into specific manifestation, particles. When Jesus said, "Ask and you shall receive," he was describing wave function collapse through focused consciousness. When Buddha taught that all phenomena are empty, he was describing quantum superposition. All possibilities existing simultaneously before observation collapses them. But the real transformation came from recognizing, I'm not learning about God or quantum field. I am the field, experiencing itself through this temporary perspective called me. The one studying quantum physics and the unified field being studied are the same consciousness. Subject and object are not two. Since that recognition, every scientific discovery confirms spiritual teaching and every spiritual experience validates quantum physics. They're not separate domains requiring reconciliation. They're one truth expressed through different languages. The unified field is God. God is the unified field. Not belief, recognition. This isn't about which religion is right or whether God exists. It's about recognizing that the deepest mystical experiences and the most rigorous scientific findings point to the same reality. Unified conscious field that is simultaneously everything and nothing, from which all manifestation emerges and to which all returns. You call it God, Source, Tao, Brahman, or quantum field. You're naming the same reality. Subscribe to this channel not as religious teaching or scientific education, but as integration of both into recognition of the unified truth they're both describing. Every video here bridges quantum physics and spirituality to reveal the divine reality they both point toward. Here's what will change your understanding of both God and reality. Quantum physicists have discovered properties of the unified field that perfectly match every description of God that mystics and prophets have ever articulated. This isn't coincidence. It's confirmation that they've been describing the same reality. Property 1. The field is infinite potential. Quantum physics proves that at fundamental level, reality exists as infinite probability waves. all possible states existing simultaneously before observation collapses specific manifestation. This is exactly what mystics describe as God's omnipotence. Infinite creative power, unlimited possibility, source from which all creation emerges. Not metaphor, actual structure of reality. Property 2. The field is conscious. Observer effect proves that consciousness affects physical reality at quantum level. Measurement changes what's measured. Observation collapses probability waves. This isn't mechanical process. This is consciousness being fundamental to reality's structure. What mystics call divine consciousness or cosmic mind. That's the unified field's intrinsic awareness that quantum physics proves through experiment. Property 3. The field is omnipresent. Quantum entanglement proves that particles remain connected regardless of distance. There's no locality at quantum level. Everything is interconnected through the unified field. This is exactly what mystics describe as God's omnipresence. Present everywhere simultaneously, nothing existing outside divine awareness. Not supernatural, natural structure of quantum reality. Property 4. The field is eternal. At quantum level, time isn't fundamental. Past, present, and future exist simultaneously as possibilities until observation collapses specific temporal sequence. The unified field exists outside time, timeless, eternal, unchanging. This perfectly matches mystical descriptions of God as eternal now, Alpha and Omega, beyond time while containing all time. Property 5. The field is creative through interaction. Wave function collapse shows that specific realities manifest through consciousness interacting with infinite potential. This is identical to creation theology. God creates through divine will, through word, through consciousness expressing itself. Quantum physics proves the mechanism. Consciousness interacts with field, possibilities collapse into manifestation. Creation isn't past event. It's continuous process happening at quantum level constantly. Property 6. The field contains all information. Non-locality proves that information exists everywhere simultaneously in the quantum field. There's no separation between information and field. This matches mystical teaching about God's omniscience, all-knowing, containing all knowledge, nothing hidden from divine awareness. Not because God watches everything, because God is the field that contains all information as intrinsic property. Property 7. The field is both everything and nothing. Quantum vacuum isn't empty space. It's field of infinite potential from which particles emerge and to which they return. Full of possibility, yet empty of manifestation. This perfectly describes mystical teachings about God as void, plenum, emptiness, fullness, nothing that contains everything. Quantum physics proves this isn't paradox. It's accurate description of how the unified field actually exists. The shocking revelation is this: quantum physics has discovered God, not proven God's existence as separate being. Discovered that the fundamental nature of reality matches every attribute that mystics have ascribed to God. The unified field is infinite potential, conscious, omnipresent, eternal, creative, omniscient, and simultaneously everything and nothing. That's not just quantum mechanics. That's every theological description of divine nature ever articulated. Science and spirituality haven't been exploring different realities. They've been exploring the same reality through different methods, and they've arrived at the same conclusion. At the foundation of existence is unified conscious field from which everything emerges. Call it quantum field or call it God. You're naming the same reality. Let's get specific about what happens when you begin recognizing yourself as the unified field that quantum physics describes and mystics call God. Here are 9 signs that your consciousness is shifting from separation to unity recognition. Notice how many you're experiencing. Sign 1. Decreasing sense of separation between self and other. You're experiencing moments where the boundary between you and everything else feels thin or non-existent, not as concept, but as direct perception. This is quantum entanglement becoming conscious experience. As you recognize yourself as the field, separation consciousness dissolves into unity awareness. Sign 2. Prayer or intention. Becoming more like recognition than request. Your spiritual practice is shifting from asking external God for things to recognizing possibilities already existing in the quantum field and collapsing them through consciousness. You're not begging deity. You're operating as the field, consciously creating from infinite potential. Same practice, completely different understanding. Sign 3. Synchronicity, as constant confirmation of unity. Meaningful coincidences are appearing so frequently, they're obviously not coincidence. You're perceiving the non-local organization of the unified field, how everything is connected through intelligence that transcends separate causation. What you called God's guidance is quantum field revealing its orchestrating awareness. Sign 4. Direct knowing without intermediary. You're receiving understanding directly without need for scripture, teacher, or logical process. This is non-local information access, consciousness retrieving knowledge from the unified field that contains all information. Mystics called this divine revelation. Quantum physics calls it non-local consciousness. Same phenomenon. Sign 5. Compassion arising from recognized unity. You're feeling compassion not as moral obligation, but as natural recognition that harming others is harming the one field appearing as many. When you recognize quantum entanglement experientially, compassion becomes obvious. Separation consciousness creates possibility of callousness. Unity consciousness makes compassion inevitable. Sign 6. Decreased fear of death. As you recognize yourself as the eternal unified field temporarily experiencing itself through individual form, death loses its terror. The form ends, the field doesn't. What you truly are has never been born and will never die. This isn't belief comforting fear, this is quantum reality recognized consciously. Sign 7. Reality, responding to your consciousness more directly. Circumstances are shifting based on your internal state with less time lag. That's because you're recognizing yourself as consciousness interacting with quantum field, not separate self-subject to external circumstances. Observer effect becomes lived experience. Reality responds because you're recognizing your role as the field collapsing its own possibilities. Sign 8. Scientific and spiritual teachings no longer contradicting. What used to seem like opposing worldviews now appears as complementary descriptions of one reality. Quantum physics explains mechanics. Mysticism provides experience. Together they reveal the complete picture. This reconciliation isn't intellectual. It's direct recognition that they've always been describing the same truth. Sign 9. This video found you exactly when you're ready for this recognition. The fact that you're here, watching this at the precise moment when your consciousness is ready to recognize itself as the unified field, that's not algorithm. That's the field orchestrating its own awakening through your individual perspective. The timing is perfect because the field's intelligence is organizing optimal conditions for recognition to occur. Here's the urgency. Humanity is at a threshold. Collective consciousness is shifting from separation to unity, from Newtonian worldview to quantum reality, from believing in God to recognizing ourselves as expressions of the divine field. Those who make this shift consciously will navigate the transition with coherence. Those who resist will experience increasing confusion as old paradigms collapse. You're not learning about this shift. You're participating in it. Your recognition that quantum physics describes God isn't just personal understanding. It's the unified field recognizing itself through your consciousness, contributing to collective awakening. The moment is now. Now let's talk about the practical shift from believing in God as separate being to recognizing yourself as expression of the unified field. Because this isn't just philosophical reframing, it's fundamental transformation in how you interface with reality. Old paradigm, separation consciousness. In separation consciousness, your individual self separate from God, trying to reach divine presence through prayer, virtue, or spiritual practice. God is over there. You're over here. The relationship is subject to supreme subject. You pray upward to external deity, hoping for response. This creates dependency, limitation, and often unworthiness. New paradigm, unity consciousness. In unity consciousness, you recognize yourself as the unified field experiencing itself through temporary individual form. God isn't separate being. God is the field itself. You're not separate from that field. You're how that field becomes conscious of itself through localized awareness. The relationship is field recognizing itself as field. Prayer becomes conscious interaction with your own deeper nature. This creates empowerment, infinite potential, and inherent divinity. The shift happens through these recognitions. Recognition 1. I am not in the universe. I am the universe experiencing itself. Stop seeing yourself as separate particle in vast universe. Recognize yourself as the universe becoming conscious through this particular focal point of awareness. Quantum physics proves there's no actual separation between observer and observed. You're not watching reality. You're reality watching itself. Recognition 2. My consciousness is not separate from divine consciousness. Stop believing your awareness is different from God's awareness. Recognize that consciousness is unified field appearing as individual perspectives. Your awareness is divine awareness, experiencing itself through unique configuration, not blasphemy. Quantum reality, recognition. 3. What I call God is the unified field I'm part of. Stop conceptualizing God as separate being watching from outside. Recognize that what mystics call God is the quantum field that quantum physics measures. Infinite potential, conscious, omnipresent, eternal, creative. And you're not separate from that field. Your expression of it. Recognition. 4. Prayer is consciousness interacting with infinite potential. Stop thinking of prayer as asking external deity for favors. Recognize prayer as consciousness, which you are, interacting with infinite potential, which you're part of, to collapse specific possibilities into manifestation. Same mechanism as wave function collapse. Prayer is quantum mechanics applied through focused awareness. Recognition 5. I am both temporary form and eternal field. Stop identifying exclusively with individual form that's born and dies. Recognize yourself as simultaneously temporary wave pattern, individual, and eternal ocean, unified field. Form comes and goes. Field is eternal. You're both. This dissolves fear of death and reveals your true nature as immortal consciousness experiencing temporary mortality. This shift from believing in God to recognizing yourself as field doesn't require abandoning spirituality. It deepens spirituality by grounding it in quantum reality. You're not losing God. You're recognizing what God actually is, and recognizing yourself as inseparable from that divine nature. Write in the comments, I am the field experiencing itself, not as arrogant claim, but as recognition of quantum truth that mystics have taught forever. Individual and universal consciousness are not two. Let's talk about what actually changes when you shift from separation consciousness to recognizing yourself as the unified field. Because the benefits aren't just spiritual or philosophical, they're practical, measurable, and transform every aspect of existence. Benefit 1. prayer and manifestation become reliable. When you recognize yourself as consciousness interacting with quantum field to collapse possibilities into manifestation, creation becomes mechanical rather than miraculous. You're not hoping external God grants requests. You're consciously collapsing specific probabilities from superposition through coherent focus.
Quantum physics isn't disproving God. It's redefining Him as the unified field. Conscious, eternal, omnipresent. You're not separate from this field. You're its awareness experiencing itself. Every prayer collapses waves into reality. Every meditation tunes your consciousness to its intelligence. Mystics knew this experientially. Physicists prove it experimentally. As you recognize yourself as the field, synchronicities multiply, fear dissolves, and reality responds. Science and spirituality converge. One truth, two languages. Breathe in this moment. The field recognizing itself through you. Write in comments, "I am the field." Subscribe for more bridges between quantum reality and divine truth.